Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and at last we have arrived at the fourth and final installment of top 10 characters in Marvel Future Fight by typing. We've gone through combat, we've gone through speed, and we've gone through blast, which leaves us at universal. And the universal class, to give you a little bit of backstory and history, is actually pretty interesting because when Marvel Future Fight started, they were overpowered. And then as Marvel Future Fight started to evolve and introduce tier 3s and things like that, universals just completely fell into disuse and were actually one of the worst classes. They still had very strong base characters, but they just weren't getting tier 3s, believe it or not. And there was actually multiple campaigns by players and by the community, and I made multiple videos begging the devs to tier 3 more universal types because there just wasn't any, there weren't any tier 3s coming out for universals. It was like blast, combat speed, blast, combat speed, blast. For every one universal, we would get 2 or possibly 3 of all other of the types, of the 3 types, combat, blast, and speed. And now we can definitely say that they hurt us because in the last 2 years, they have tier 3'd so many universals, it's insane. And the Eternals update is honestly a really good microcosm of that because not only did we get tier 3 Icarus, but then we also got tier 3 Athena, 2 universals back to back, and then, oh yeah, the mid-month update for that was tier 3 Hela. So it was literally 3 universals back to back to back. So yeah, we have now an abundance of very strong tier 3 universals, and I think they are by far the most balanced class in terms of their PvE and PvP potential. I don't want that to continue, however. I do want to say that as much as I love the universal class, I don't think the universal class should dominate as much as it's dominating because universal characters always have a bit of an unfair advantage over the other 3 classes. Because if you take a look at the standard rock, paper, scissors triangle that blast, speed, and combat creates, just like it is with Pokemon, fire beats grass, grass beats water, water beats fire. Universal just sits there in the middle chilling, like the OG dragon type in the original Pokemon games where it had no weaknesses and it deals super effective damage to all of the other popular types. And that's the case with universals in Marvel Future Fight. They have no weakness and they deal additional damage to all 3 other types, which is kind of broken. So here's 2 more amazing and very cool and very unique universal types, but at the same time, I do caution the devs not to get too into their creativity because combat, blast, and speed should have some sort of edge to combat the fact that they do not deal super effective damage to universals. No one does, and that they are sort of always at a bit of a disadvantage. That shows itself most in PvP, where the meta for PvP has almost always revolved around 1 or 2 universal types, but hopefully things will change. They are sort of changing slowly. We're seeing a shift to combats now, and hopefully that will continue. However, I've blathered on long enough with sort of reminiscing on the history of Marvel Future Fight that I love so much, a game that I've given so much time to, and that we've shared so many memories with. Let's jump into my number 10 pick here, Proxima Midnight. Now, I'm not a big fan of Proxima, so I will admit that some of my bias is showing here. I think she is an okay standalone DPS character, but the majority of her value, in my opinion, especially with exclusively within a uniform, I would say, comes from her dual amazing leadership, which applies to all allies, villain and hero, and then her uniform passive, I believe, which gives villain allies additional damage to both heroes and villains. So she's got a really good sort of combination of Taskmaster's passive or Mystique's passive, plus this very crucial leadership. And we found out this year that ignore dodge is so important for lots of endgame content, and that's where Proxima comes in. Now, is she a bad standalone character? In my opinion, no. She's got multiple heals, like 3 different heals. She's got high damage. She's got, you know, lots of hits and AoE. But for me, the issue is, like Thor, she has a 4th skill with a charge mechanic. Tapping and holding the skill will charge it, and releasing it will commence. And as you charge it, you get more and more of that buff. That all attack, that 60% frenzy buff there, doesn't actually start at 60%. If you just go ahead and tap it, you're actually going to get a much smaller buff. And I mean, it's several magnitudes smaller, because if you take a look here, if I just tap it and let go, I'm getting what? I'm not getting any buff, actually. There it is. I have to hold it for that long to get a 20% buff. So I not only have to hold it there. I think that's the maximum buff there that you get, and that is going to be giving you the maximum 60%. So holding it for less than a second gives you no buff. Holding it for a second gives you 20% of a buff. And then you have to hold it for close to, I would say, 2.5, maybe 3 seconds to get the full buff. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm also not a big fan of the fact that Proxima has no super armor, which means she gets interrupted a lot while she's sitting there charging that fourth skill, because unlike Thor, her fourth skill, I believe, is not an iframe, whereas Thor's fourth skill, where he's charging it up, is an iframe. I do generally think that she plays a lot like Thor, except she has better cooldowns than Thor does. But yeah, the fact that this is an immunity skill and not an invincibility skill hurts her, especially because it's not an iframe. So anyways, all of this is to say that although I think Proxima is really good, I do think her own DPS, like her standalone power, is overhyped, and I think it's overhyped because generally players don't use regular CTPs if they're trying to get the most out of their Proximas. They use reforged energies, or you could actually now use a Mighty Destruction. I think in that case she could be very, very good because now she has guard break immunity, which is very nice because the reforging on the energy, when you have the additional effect, I forget what it's called, but that additional effect that gives you extra pierce, that one will also, the beatdown proc, that beatdown effect also gives you, it grants you super armor so you don't get interrupted. If she's not interrupted, she could be definitely higher on this list, but I'm not gonna, rank her on this list. She wouldn't be much higher. She'd be 1 or 2 spots higher just based on having a reforged CTP. So yeah, for me, she's number 10. I think that's solid. Some people will say she's better, that I'm undervaluing her, that I'm a hater, whatever. But yeah, I factor in for these lists how easy the character is to play, how cheap the character is to play in terms of like whether you need to give them a CTP, whether you need to give them a reforged. Like if the baseline for Proxima's value for doing damage is reforged energy or reforged destruction, we kind of got a bit of a problem there, don't we? Because with a regular energy, she kind of underperforms, and with an obelisk, I think she also underperforms. So anyways, let's go to another underperformer in PvE. Number 9 is Molecule Man, and yes, he is an underperformer. He is a chronic underperformer for PvE content. He's terrible. For his cost, he may very well be, I haven't run the numbers yet, Kowalski, but he may still be the most expensive character in the game, because in order to get him, you got to go through all of this pain. However, what he severely lacks in PvE, and I will highlight that, he's very bad in PvE, he makes up for in PvP. And he makes up for that in a way that no other character does. So I would be remiss for sure. I'd be lying to myself if I didn't put him on this list. And I do think he deserves at least rank 9 because he does something that literally no other character in the game does. So that is 100% worth something because he's literally unique in that sense, his leadership. And yeah, I know it's just a leadership, and yeah, I know you can get around it and you can refresh the teams in PvP, but sometimes you can't, or sometimes you refresh the teams and you just keep seeing the same teams over and over again. You keep seeing Circes and you keep seeing Colossuses and Mystiques, and you're like, man, this is really annoying, right? Because you're trying to avoid teams that have those increase and decrease damage to heroes and villains. But there's one. There's another one. There's another one with Hela. There's the first one without it, but they're using Molecule Man. There's 2. That dude's he's double dipping with Hela and Colossus. There's another one. There's another 2. There's another one. You sort of see what I'm saying. And there's literally only one character in the game that counters that. His name is Molecule Man. His name is Owen Reese. He completely ignores the damage difference between factions. So if it says superhero increase or decrease or supervillain increase or decrease, he just says, I don't see that. I see right through those molecules. And then he also gives you chain hit reduction. And we know how much the devs love to give every new character chain hit damage. He's just so meta for PvP, it hurts. And it seems like he's going to be meta for a very long time because the devs don't really introduce a lot of new characters that avoid Molecule Man's material transformation, leadership, and negation. The only example I can think of right now is part of Circe's buff. So part of Circe's passive does apply just an increase of attack buff to Eternal's allies. The only other one would be the defenders, because their buffs, although those buffs give them increases and decreases to incoming damage, those damages are not faction based. They're just flat increases and decreases in damage. So he doesn't ignore things like the steal effects from a CTP of authority, but he does ignore any faction based buffs, and for that I think he's the most useful, or one of the most useful characters in PvP as a foil, as a counter, and that definitely makes him hit this list. Coming up at number 8, we have Ghost Rider, and Ghost Rider is basically the opposite of Molecule Man. He's got no PvP value, but he's got insane PvE value with one glaring weakness. He has no heal. Ghost Rider may be the last great character in Marvel Future Fight at this point who does insane burst damage, has really cool animations, basically ticks all the boxes for you, except for one thing: he doesn't have a heal. And I know it might be a little bit tragic, the King of Hell, the Ghost Rider, you know, the Spirit of Vengeance can't heal himself. I'm kind of okay with it at this point. It was kind of annoying back in September of 2020, but we've gotten used to it since then. We've learned to play with Ghost Rider in a way that, you know, makes up for that flaw. But I do think that they need to introduce more characters like Ghost Rider, because he's so cool, and not every character needs a heal, right? It doesn't need to become so prevalent that it becomes mundane and sort of boring and nonsensical. So yeah, Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider is not higher on this list because he's a little bit held back by his damage at this point. Like, he's already being outpaced by newer, shinier universals, and he also lacks a heal, but he is very, very good, and he can still put up DPS with the best of them in a hurry, thanks largely in part to an insane third skill, King's Gaze. Go ahead and take some time and read all those buffs. It's gorgeous, and he has a 250% proc that triggers. It's awesome. It's really, really cool. I love the design on this effect, and I think the devs nailed it. They hit it out of the park with Ghost Rider. They completely matched the way that the character feels when you read him in the comics to play him in the game. Coming up next at number 7, we have Scarlet Witch. And Scarlet Witch is actually funny because I think she's sort of neck and neck with Ghost Rider. She does have a heal. She has some other effects that make her seem like she's okay for PvP, and I know she's not traditionally, or she's not originally a universal type, I recognize that, but she is now, and she's probably going to stay universal forever. My guess is, I don't know, maybe not, but she is universal for now, so that's where we're going to put her. And although I would say she's not like Ghost Rider, she is actually a lot like Ghost Rider, and she does a lot of the same things that Ghost Rider does, just do high damage in lots of different PvE content with very little PvP value. And although she doesn't have a really cool third skill with iframe ignore and all of that, she's got V-pad, she blasts around the screen, and if I was making a list of the most gorgeous skill animations in the game, she would be number 1. So keep that in mind, because yeah, there's no way. There's no way, buddy. There's no way. There's just no competition there. So yeah, I'm going to put her number 7 because technically speaking, there are characters who deal more damage, who are more impactful and influential in the meta. But when it comes to the look, ain't nobody beating Wanda just yet. Maybe for Multiverse of Madness, we'll see Doctor Strange compete or something. But for now, the devs have set the bar very, very high for animations. I don't know why it keeps going back to the home screen when I hit back there. But anywho, going on to number 6, we have Hela, a new entrance. Here comes a new challenger. And Hela really excels in all 3 categories. She's an amazing leadership. She's got an amazing godly support that you're going to see more and more in PvP. And then she has one skill that deals damage, Death's Arsenal, but it deals so much damage, it's insane, and your jaw is going to drop. That's basically what it is for Hela. I don't think she's going to be a fan favorite in terms of playstyle because, like I said, her 1 to 5 doesn't do any damage, and so it's a bit frustrating to see so little damage and then such a huge burst off. You know, it's not for everybody. Let's be honest. But for the players that it is for, they love it. And Hela is really cool, and she got a much needed rework, and she's much more in line with where the character should be, considering she is now the goddess of death. So yeah, Hela close to the top 5, but not quite there in my opinion, because she's competing with the gods of Marvel Future Fight. Starting us off with number 5, Null, the OG native tier 3. Now, I'm going to get some hate for this. I'm going to get some people in the comments saying Hela's better than Null. Alex, you're being a simp. You're being, you know, because listen, I love Null. He's really cool. He's got a necro sword. Yeah. He's dope. Yeah. If Wanda is number 1 for skill animations, Null might be number 2. But I do think that some players are underestimating Null at this point. And I think in large part it has to do with his lack of synergy with reforged CTPs. That's fine. I'm not going to try to deny that that's true. He doesn't have synergy with reforged CTPs, but he is still insanely good. And for those of you that forgot what it was like when you didn't have any Pierce, Null was your light in the darkness with 5% Pierce. I don't even know where it is. I think it's here. 5% Pierce is insanely powerful for a newer account. Newer just in the sense that you don't have Pierce on your cards. Any account that doesn't have Pierce on their cards, Null immediately catapults, skyrockets to the top of your roster, and he can do it all with very little investment in his build. He's got built-in revive like Sentry and Dr. Doom and others, but it's even better than revive because he doesn't die, so he can sort of build on any buffs that you have right now at the moment. Doesn't give the enemy time to relax and reset their cooldowns. he never really made the impact in PvP that we were hoping for, but he came out right after Sentry, so he had his work cut out for him. But I do think Null is still very, very good. And who knows? Maybe we'll see a reforged Rage that brings Null back into the fold or something else. But I do think he's still underrated, and I do think he's still very, very good for PvE and PvP. Up next after that, we have Sentry at number 4. And Sentry would be higher on this list if I had made this list a few months ago. But since then, we've gotten Wolverine, we've gotten Gilgamesh, we've gotten Cersei. We've gotten a lot of PvP contenders that can go toe-to-toe with Mr. Blondie. And a year after his introduction, more or less, he's starting to show signs of weakness, which is pretty cool because he was so ridiculously dominant in PvP for so long. And you still see him on almost every team because he's basically the second coming of Jean Grey. But let's face it, that's kind of it for him. I was one of the first players to sort of, okay, I don't want to take too much credit for this, but I was one of the first players to sort of point out that his PvE potential was never really that good, and I never really was a fan of using him with a PvE build. I know some players still do. They get away with using him with a Rage because they're playing in Platinum or lower league, or they're playing low stakes Vibranium. But I do think at this point, it's undoubtable. You can't doubt it that he doesn't have any PvE value. He just doesn't. And whereas Null can still go up to stage 30, 35 against World Boss Legend, Sentry falls short of that much, much sooner, especially if you can't give him a reforged CTP. Then it really just leaves him with PvP. And he's still very good for PvP, don't get me wrong. The Mighty and the Brilliant Greed have shown us a new side of Sentry that's terrifying, and there's always the possibility that he gets a Void uniform and he just rips a hole through the game, but he is starting to slow down a little bit, and that's why he's not higher on this list. For as dominant as he is in PvP, he's sort of starting to go the way of the Dodo and Jean Grey. He's only good for PvP, and there may already be cheaper, better alternatives. So he's 4th here, out of respect to him and out of, for what he's done to shape the meta. But yeah, we're starting to see sort of the changing of the hand or the changing of the guard. All my euphemisms are goofed up today. Anyways, moving into the top 3, we're going to start it off with Athena. And Athena is, I think, underrated. She's really, really good. She's busted. She's near the top for PvE content. And I think the best way to exemplify that, and you can look at other YouTubers' videos as well, like Commander did a video recently comparing them and others. She competes. She's one of the only characters who can compete with Loki, President Loki and TVA Loki, for clearing Dimension Rifts and clearing Dispatch, despite the fact that her all defense down is only 30%, which is criminally low for characters that are supposed to be good in those game modes, because those game modes require a lot of all defense down. But what she doesn't have in all defense down, she basically makes up for with insanely short cooldowns, insane damage, lots of hits, crazy accumulation, crazy AoE, crazy passives that are offensive and defensive, and she's got her own artifact, which is really clutch, and you can farm it for free. So yeah, Athena, I think, is underrated. She's amazing for ABX, Squad Battle, World Boss Ultimate, World Boss Legend, GBR, one-shotting, DRX one-shotting. Anything PvE related, she can do it. She's going to fall short in PvP, but that's why you have characters like Sentry. Yeah, in my opinion, she's definitely top 3. Which leaves us with 2. And here we go. Number 2, Dr. Doom. I know what you're going to say. I know there's some simps out there for Victor that are going to say he's number 1. I don't quite think so. However, Dr. Doom is probably number 1 when it comes to the best overall character in Marvel Future Fight, so I will give him that honorable mention right now, and I'll sort of pin that badge on his armor. He is the best two-way character in the sense that you have a character that if you build him for PvE, he can be top 5. If you build him for PvP, he can be top 2 or top 1. He might be the best PvP character in the game. So yeah, he's very, very strong. He has all of the tools that you need for PvP. Revive, iframe ignore, crazy healing, crazy iframes, all that good stuff, debuff. And then for PvE, he's got it all as well. Very, very high damage, very high AoE, crazy accumulation, all defense down, frenzy buffs, and then a berserk ultimate skill, Inevitable Doom, that just does crazy, crazy damage. So he's really the total package. The only reason why he's not number 1 is because he doesn't dominate, like singularly dominate, as many game modes as the number 1 character does. So yeah, Dr. Doom may dominate timeline battle. Let's just say, just for fun, he's number 1 for timeline and he's number 1 for Alliance Conquest. Okay, and let's say he's number 1 for Alliance Tournament. Okay, that's 3 game modes. he's probably not number one for any PvE game modes, unless you were saying only universal villains. But even then, that leaves us with our number one pick. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Loki is the number one universal character in this game, and I sort of gave you guys some clues as we were talking about it, but Loki really combines so many different factors to consider, and although he doesn't have any PvP presence, so overall I would say he's a weaker character than Doom if you're going to count all game modes and add them up and then divide them, sort of like what we said for Sharon Rogers and Mephisto, he makes up for that. He makes up for that by being number one for ABX, being number one for, or very close to number one for squad battle, being very close to well, he is number one for dimension rifts, he's number one for dispatch. He can literally solo dispatch. There is not a single character in this game. I mentioned that Maul Human was so special because he has the leadership in the game that no other character has. Okay, so show me Doctor Doom going to 10-1 and actually legitimately soloing with no other character on the team, because Loki can do that. You can take everyone else off the team and just play with Loki manually. He can't do it on auto. Maybe some accounts can, but you know, it's ridiculous how powerful he is. It's almost inexplainable in my opinion. It's kind of defies logic. If you look at his build and if you look at his stats and his skills, like, they're good. Don't get me wrong, they're good. But you're kind of thinking to yourself, like, does this really set him apart? I think maybe the devs did some tweaking behind the scenes. Maybe he's got some hidden buffs, but there's literally no other character besides maybe Athena that can keep up with him for dimension rifts. He's literally that good. Like, he eclipses Mephisto and every other character for dimension rifts. Like I said, he's the only character that can literally solo stage 10 of or sector 10 of dispatch, ABX 12 million easy. Right? Easy. The only character in the game that can hit 12 million with a regular CTP. That's just mind-boggling. He does things in PvE that we've never seen before, and he's been out for months, right? Like, we've gotten Universal since then. We've gotten new characters since then, and they're not touching him, right? The Dimension Rift missions, the Dimension Rift game mode came out after Loki came out. This is like, think about this. This game mode came out after Loki, and he dominates it singularly. Like, everybody who's running Dimension Rifts competitively is running Loki, unless they want to be the hipster kid and run Athena. So yeah, he's definitely deserving of number one, no doubt in my mind. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a Herculean effort to take him off that top spot for best universal. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think, who you think is the best universal. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.